Last night, just after 11:47 p.m., when the neighborhood was silent and the streetlights flickered like dying fireflies, I heard the knock, that slow, deliberate, unsettling knock that didn't belong in a world where people knocked to be welcomed. Because this knock was different, too patient, too measured. Like whoever stood behind my door wasn't trying to announce themselves, but rather testing the thin layer of wood that separated them from me. Studying it, tasting the moment, as if trying to decide whether to come in or wait for me to open. And it woke me from a half-dream in which I was floating through a foggy corridor that felt eerily like the hallway of my own house, which made the shock of waking so violent that I sat bolt upright, heart pounding, mind scrambling for any logical explanation. Delivery guy? Neighbor? A mistake? But it was nearly midnight, and no one knocks on anyone's door at midnight unless something is wrong. And so, for a long moment, I just sat there listening, letting the darkness of my room press into my skin, the hum of the ceiling fan, suddenly sounding too loud, too sharp, like it was hiding something beneath it, something quiet, something breathing. And then, just when I started convincing myself it was only my imagination, the knock came again. 3 taps, evenly spaced, gently applied, like knuckles tapping glass rather than wood. And this time the sound crawled under my skin and rooted itself there, because something about the rhythm felt familiar. Not like a person knocking, but like a code. A pattern I had heard years ago, but forgotten, until that moment when some buried instinct whispered to me, "This is not the first time." And I don't know why that terrified me more than the knock itself. So I slid my feet off the bed, toes touching the cold floor, and my body moved before my mind could stop it. Each step toward the door slow and deliberate. The house around me holding its breath as if it knew something I didn't, shadows stretching along the walls, shifting ever so slightly with each passing second. The digital clock on the wall glowed 11:48 p.m. in harsh red. But the numbers seemed too bright, too sharp, and I realized I hadn't taken a full breath since waking. So I inhaled shakily, just as I reached the living room and saw the hallway leading to the front door, a thin, dark tunnel where the only source of light was the faint outdoor glow bleeding through the frosted glass window above the frame, casting a distorted shape on the floor that looked vaguely like a person's elongated shadow, except no one should have been standing that close unless their face was practically pressed against the door. I froze. Everything in my body screamed to step back, but I couldn't. Maybe it was curiosity, maybe stupidity, maybe instinct. But I found myself walking forward, each footstep sounding thunderous in the stillness. And as I got closer, I stopped just a few feet from the door and listened to Lee, and there it was. Faint, but unmistakable. The sound of breathing on the other side. Slow. Calm. To calm. Not panicked, not anxious, not hurried. Whoever was there was waiting for me just as patiently as they had knocked, like they knew I would come. Like this was all part of something they had rehearsed countless times before. For a moment, I considered calling the police, but when I reached into my pocket for my phone, my fingers brushed only fabric. My phone wasn't there. I remembered leaving it on the bedside table when I fell asleep, so I was alone. No light, no weapon, no phone. Just me and a presence behind my door that didn't belong to any normal world. I swallowed hard and forced myself to speak, my voice shaky and barely above a whisper. "Who's there?" No reply, not even movement, just breathing. I felt my heart rise into my throat, choking me as I tried again, louder. "Who is it? Do you need help?" Still nothing. And then, after almost 20 painfully silent seconds, the breathing stopped. Completely. The sudden absence of sound was so violent, it made my ears ring. I pressed my ear closer to the door, trying to hear anything, any hint of movement. My fingertips hovered over the handle. And that's when it happened. A whisper. So soft it felt like it traveled not through the air, but directly through the wood into my skull. "Are you awake now?" I staggered backward so fast I nearly fell, my legs buckling as cold dread washed over me. The voice wasn't familiar, but the tone, It carried something strange, an unnatural calmness, an intrusive intimacy. Like whoever it was knew me personally, deeply, maybe even better than anyone in my life did. And before I could recover, the whisper came again, this time a little clearer. I saw your light turn on. My bedroom light was off. Our living room light was off. Every light in the house was off. So what light did they see? The question twisted in my stomach like a knife. With trembling hands, I reached for the peephole, but as I leaned in to look, I felt a wave of instinctual fear so strong that it physically pushed me backward, as if some part of me already knew. What I would see through that tiny circle of glass and knew I wasn't ready to witness it. I hesitated, breathing fast, and then gathering every ounce of willpower. I looked. Nothing. The porch was empty. The street was empty. The faint glow of the streetlight illuminated nothing but stillness. But then, just as I exhaled, relieved, a face filled the peplet, not appearing from the side, not stepping into view, but appearing instantly, as if it had been there the entire time but hiding just outside the peephole's narrow field of view. The face was pale, possibly pale, almost white, with eyes too wide open and unblinking, staring directly at me with irises so dark they looked like holes punched through paper. The face didn't move, didn't blink, didn't breathe. It was expressionless, frozen like a mask carved into marble. I stumbled back with a choking gasp, heart slamming against my ribs as I tripped over the side table, knocking down a glass that shattered loudly across the tile floor. The noise echoed through the house like an explosion, breaking the eerie silence, and then the knock came again. Not slow, not calm, but fast, violent, aggressive. Bang, bang. It rattled the hinges, shook the frame, vibrated through the floorboards. Syncing with my racing heartbeat, let me in. The whisper no longer sounded soft. It sounded hungry. I wanted to run, wanted to hide, wanted to scream, but I couldn't move. I could barely breathe. And then, just as suddenly as it began, the knocking stopped. Total silence fell again. I waited. 1 second, 5, 10, 30. Nothing. Finally, after what felt like an hour, I crawled forward and forced myself to look through the peephole again. The figure was gone. The porch empty once more. No movement, no shadow, no presence. But just as relief started dissolving the fear, tightening my chest, I noticed something else, something worse. Pinned to my door right next to the peephole was a piece of paper. A small, white, perfectly centered note, but I hadn't heard anyone pin anything? I hadn't heard footsteps leaving. My shaking hands unlocked the door against every instinct, screaming not to open it. And when I opened it just an inch, enough to grab the paper, I pulled it inside and shut the door immediately. My heart pounding like a trapped animal, under the dim glow of the streetlight coming through the window. I unfolded the paper. There were only 4 words written on it. You shouldn't have looked. And just as I stared at the note in horror, something moved at the end of my hallway. Not outside, not behind the door. It's inside my house, something that wasn't there before. Something tall, something watching. And that's when I realized. Knock wasn't meant to warn me. It was meant to distract me. Something wasn't trying to get in. It was already inside. Arman didn't sleep at all after the knock. Instead, he sat frozen on the edge of his sofa, staring at the door as though his eyes alone could hold it shut. But as the dim digital clock on his TV blinked from 11:48 p.m. to 11:49 p.m., he felt something. Worse than fear, he felt watched, as if the walls themselves were leaning inward to listen to his heartbeat. And the silence in his home became unnaturally heavy, thick enough to press on his chest. So he stood, slowly, step by cautious step, and approached the window facing the quiet, dimly lit street, pulling the curtain just half an inch to peek outside, only to see nothing but the usual empty road, the flickering streetlight, and the swaying shadow of a tree that looked more like a figure than a plant in the darkness. Yet something felt wrong, terribly wrong, because he could swear that the tree hadn't been standing at that angle before. Shaking it off, he checked all doors again, turning every lock, securing every latch. Psst, telling himself he was overreacting, but as he passed by the hallway mirror, he froze instantly because he saw something that made his blood turn cold. His reflection wasn't aligned with his movements. It was a fraction of a second late, as if it were thinking before copying him. He blinked hard, leaned forward, and the reflection behaved normally again. But the damage was already done. His heart pounded like a drum inside his ribs. He walked backward, unable to look away from the mirror, even though he desperately wanted to, because deep down, he felt that if he turned his back on it, something inside that reflection would move on its own. So he forced himself to continue toward his bedroom, keeping every light switched on behind him, and just as he reached the door, he heard it again, the same knock, soft, slow, deliberate, the exact same pattern as before. 3 knocks. Pause. 2 knocks, but this time it was not from the main door. It was from the window he had checked just minutes ago, the second-floor window that no one could reach without a ladder. His breath stuck in his throat as he turned toward the sound, and before he could move, his phone buzzed violently in his pocket, making him flinch. He pulled it out with trembling hands and saw an anonymous message. "Don't look outside. Whatever you do, don't." His fingers froze around the phone, because whoever sent this message knew exactly what was happening around him at this very moment. Suddenly, he heard a soft dragging sound near the wall outside, like nails scraping lightly across the brick surface. Traveling horizontally across the exterior of his home, slowly circling toward his bedroom window. Arman backed away, bumping into his bed, heart racing so violently he thought he would faint, and the scraping stopped directly under the window. In the silence that followed, he heard slow breathing, deep, heavy, animal-like, but intentionally. Quiet, as if whoever or whatever was outside was trying to mimic human breathing but didn't understand how. His phone buzzed again. "Don't let it see you. Stay low." Arman dropped to the floor instantly, crawling backward until his back hit the wall, and shadows from the window stretched unnaturally long across the room, moving in ways they shouldn't move, writhing like fingers searching for something. Suddenly, the silhouette of a hand appeared on the window, a long, distorted hand with impossibly thin fingers that tapped gently on the glass tap. Tap, tap, making the window pane vibrate. Arman covered his mouth with both hands to stop himself from making a sound, tears forming in his eyes as the tapping grew slightly louder, then stopped abruptly. He dared not breathe. Then, slowly, a tall, elongated shadow slid past the window, like a stretched-out human figure dragging itself along the wall, moving in a jerky, unnatural rhythm, as though its limbs bent in directions no bones should bend. Seconds felt like hours before the shadow finally vanished. Arman stared at the window, waiting, listening, praying, until his phone buzzed for the 3rd time. It's not gone. It's inside. Arman didn't remember standing up, didn't remember moving, didn't even remember taking a breath, but as soon as he read the message, it's inside. His entire body reacted with a jolt, freezing him on the spot as a cold ripple of dread washed over him like a bucket of ice water, making every hair on his body stand, and though every instinct screamed at him to run, to hide, to scream, to do anything, he found himself unable to move, held in place by fear so deep it felt like his soul was trying to crawl out of his skin. The house was silent, not the normal silence he knew, but a dead, heavy, suffocating quietness that carried intention, as if whatever had come inside was waiting for him to make a sound, a movement, a mistake. He swallowed painfully, his throat so dry it burned, and slowly lowered the phone, forcing himself to really listen to the house around him, and that's when he heard it. The faintest creaking of a floorboard somewhere in the hallway, slow, steady, like something heavy, was putting its weight down carefully, testing the wood. Arman's breath hitched, and he slid himself lower against the wall, trying to make himself invisible. But the creaking came again closer, this time each soft groan of wood echoing like thunder in his ears. And his heart banged wildly against his ribs, so loud he was terrified it would give him away. He crawled quietly toward the underside of his bed, not because he believed it was safe, but because it was the only place he could reach without being seen from the doorway. and as he slipped beneath it, pressing himself against the cold floor, he caught the faint reflection of the hallway in the glossy surface of his wardrobe door. The reflection showed the edge of the hallway entrance. Then, slowly, a long, dark shadow stretched across the floor, reaching into his room like fingers searching for him. Arman held his breath until his lungs burned, every muscle in his body tense, trembling, and a tall figure appeared in the reflection. Distorted by the angle, but undeniably humanoid, its limbs unnaturally long, its neck too thin, its head tilting slowly as if scenting the air. It stepped into the room with a jerky motion, knees bending the wrong way, his toes scraping lightly against the floor, and Arman felt a cold wave pass over him as the creature paused.